Goedemiddag allemaal, welkom bij deze presentatie. I steal this joke from Hakom, welcome. But I will do it in English, of course. So don't worry, you don't need ChatGPT for Google Translate, but we will do this presentation in English. So welcome everybody to this presentation titled The Canary in the Coal Mine of Cybersecurity. Today I'm standing here at the stage next to almost 30 years of cybersecurity and fraud strategics, Ewart Driehuis. And he's also Vice President of Fraud Engineering at ThreatFabric, wonderful colleague. So let me introduce you to the first difficult Dutch name, Ewart Driehuis.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline Nijsing. So say it with me, Jacqueline Nijsing. Can you do that? No worries, we'll do it for you. Jacqueline, I'm actually the one who should be proud standing here. Jacqueline is an agent of change. She has been in fraud and in operations for a very long time. She's worked in one of the biggest European banks, ABN AMRO. And on top of that, she has run the International Program Committee for the EFD Fraud Group here at RSA for over 5 years. So it's my immense pleasure to be presenting together.
Thank you, Ewart.
Oh yeah,
the clicker.
It was my job to click. Let's not forget that. This disclaimer, take 2 seconds of a look of it, take a picture of it, and read it later. We will dive in. We're talking about the misery that's been going on in the world because criminals are still trying to get our money. And the way they're doing that is in various capacities and various MOs. To the left, we're seeing an English gentleman called John Oliver. Love him or hate him, I won't ask you to raise your fingers. He was talking about pig butchering here. Now, we don't like the term pig butchering. You can say it is actually a romance fraud type of scam with an investment scam cash out variant. But whatever it is, it brought a lot of attention to this problem, including that the actual scammers themselves often are victims as well. It's one of the complicating factors of these problems that we're talking about today. And to the right, we're seeing Ms. Liz Nolan, who has been defrauded as well and came in the news in the UK. The BBC reported. But the interesting thing was, whereas the pig butchering one was almost completely done by social engineering, Ms. Nolan was hit by a malware called Anatsa. And the malware was a mobile malware, and that was the actual method in which they could steal £20,000 out of her account. Scams are a nuisance, but malware is a nuisance as well. And although these two might seem very, very similar, they are in fact not, if you're looking at this from a kill chain perspective or from a technological perspective. I'll give you one more example. We heard the other day that a criminal was actually calling a victim up and telling them they were the bank, right? This is called bank impersonation fraud. And they said, well, the criminal might actually call you within the next few minutes and tell them they are the bank. But they're not. We are the bank. So we're going to agree on a safe word here, right? And what do you know? The bank indeed did pick up on that fraud attempt. And they did call the victim, and the victim, when they spoke to the bank, said, well, you're not the bank, you are the scammer, and I know this because you don't know the safe word, right? So even if you're doing everything right as a bank in your anti-fraud chain, you might still run into losses, misery, and destroyed lives.
Yeah, thanks. And it's very clear, I think, that fraud and scams have major impact on victims. Independent research in the Netherlands showed that 70% of the persons that been victimized have either are depressed or have suicidal thoughts, and that's really hurtful. Incredible. So I have got a background, like you know, Ewart, in the financial industry, like also our founders in ThreatFabric, and we saw at first hand what kind of impact it has that if people get victimized. It's more than only about losses. It's really negatively impacting people's life, like you all know, probably have dealt with it from the banking perspective, from other organizations. but it really motivates us to protect people from being victimized. And I think it's really important to mention that increasingly attacks of social engineering are more supported by technology.
That's absolutely right. And it is this technology that we want to talk about and place front and center for the next few minutes a little bit. Because this technology is the first canary in the coal mine that we're going to talk about today. So, mobile channels means mobile threats. That's what's happening out there, right? When 20 years ago banks were moving into digital channels, web channels, the criminals followed. They created something called desktop malware, and fraud was the first type of MO they tried, right? And we're seeing now the criminals are following the societal trend, and they're following our users into the mobile channels. It's that simple. They're using the same tricks. They're building their C2s, they're building their mobile malware, they're trying to infect end devices, and they're trying to leverage that to steal money. And what we are seeing is actually quite an exponential growth in the amount of unique identifiable families that we have spotted. But more than that, we see the capabilities of these families change as well. So for example, a few years ago, almost no mobile malware did device takeover. Right now, it's almost a third, or even a little bit over a third of the mobile malware that does device takeover as part of the criminal capabilities.
Yeah, and if we just have a glance about what are the most targeted countries here, we see that's really as a global problem. Over 8 billion people can be targeted. The only prerequisite is that you are active on your mobile. This research shows also that the US is on the rise from being the 4th most targeted country to climbing up to being the 2nd most targeted country. So yeah, I think for us it's the key question, is mobile malware a growing problem? Yes, we think it is. Thank you. And a thriving ecosystem has appeared. Not only the number of malware families has increased, but also everything to do with malware, for example, the hosting. Many actors, like Ewart also knows, are driven by profit, creativity. So on the left side, you see one of the most impactful mobile malware families. Some of the families have been there for a while, or for years even. Like for example, Hydra and Cerberus. Hydra, like Andrew over there knows, it started, or we noticed about Hydra around 2018. And it really has evolved over time to a very powerful device takeover Trojan. Next to that, we see also consolidation takes place. So many different malware families are now being replaced by a number of big ones.
So Jacqueline, is every important malware group in here?
No, you might have discovered it already. There's one missing, very important one. It's a NATSA. Yeah. That's really important.
Yeah, NATSA is one of the most prolific groups out there, and like the lady, Ms. Nis Nolan was targeted by this and lost her savings. They are quite a little bit less noisy. The way we count these things is by counting samples that we can see in the wild, right? And samples that we see in the wild and the amount of targets that they have. Just like regular old school malware, they have config files, and these config files have targets in them. So that's how we count. And apparently, a NATSA is a little bit less noisy, might be an indication of a group being a little bit more professional.
Yeah, next to many different countries, you can also see that many different banks are targeted. So on the right side, you see a couple of examples. And what are they trying to do, those malware families? They mainly have two objectives. The first objective is to steal data. And they use most often spyware. And the second objective, most important objective, is to enforce a device takeover. And that's by, for example, using remote access tooling and keylogging.
So you might ask yourself, well, you know, if this is mobile apps, how do they get in my back pocket? How do they get on my device, on my phone? Well, interestingly, the most common vector that we see is that criminals will actually create a totally benign app. It might be a file manager or a PDF reader or a phone cleaner, and it will actually do as advertised on the tin. They will put it in the App Store. There will be no reason to mistrust it, other than when you're a malware researcher, such as our researchers, right? Because they might recognize something, but otherwise there's no traits that actually give away that this is gonna be malware in the future. How is that gonna happen? After a few months, they might have an install base of 100,000, 200,000 sometimes. Then they do a little update. And that update will change the device in your back pocket in a backdoor to the criminal C2, right? So that's how they often do it. Another very popular way of going about this is leveraging updates for apps that you often use, like Chrome, of course. You know, this is an Android game in essence. Android is the most widely used platform for mobile malware, but not the only one, as Jacqueline is going to explain later.
Yes.
The things they can do, the functionalities that are being innovated by these innovating criminals are interesting as well. So this is the first one that I want to highlight, is an Android 13 and above security bypass that they can actually execute. So this bypass can actually allow them to open a side channel, and the side channel will, for example, be used to download updates. Now this is a very nasty trick, because it will allow them to put a benign app in the store and then later on kind of load the malicious functionality in the app. But there's more worrisome stuff happening as well. Now, who of you uses multi-factor authentication? Can we see a...
It's a big group, Evert. It's good.
There you go. And I want to applaud the people who did not raise their hands at RSA here, right? Good for you. That's coming clean. Well done. But of course, multi-factor authentication and biometrics is a valuable tool in that, but they have bypass mechanisms. You know, what they will actually do is, because one of the tricks they use is the accessibility permission on the phone. Accessibility, most of us, you know, lucky for us, have good vision, but some of us have not. And these accessibility permissions allow them to use a phone while being, for example, visually impaired. Also, these permissions will allow these apps to read screens, but also to make clicks, for example. And this is what's happening. They will leverage that permission to, when you're at the biometric screen, to bypass to the fallback mechanism. Fallback mechanisms in biometrics are, of course, very useful. If you cut your thumb, for example, your fingerprint will not work anymore. And if you're the kind of kook that I am, that will happen a lot, right? So you want that fallback in place. But then what they will do is they will kick you to the fallback immediately. You will type in your PIN code, and they will seal it using that accessibility permission. Now they have bypassed your biometrics.
You might think, okay, I already knew that Android is less restrictive, and it might be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your viewpoint, of course. But how about iOS? Now, we can see that on iOS, a functionality is called web clips. Web clips is misused to create fake applications and mimic banking apps and, for example, other apps which you are currently doing your finance with. In addition to that, we see that regulations are pressuring on Apple to open their ecosystem for third parties. So we definitely expect that there will be more methods of getting malicious apps on your phone will be applied or other Apple device.
Yeah. Can I see another raise of hands? Are there any Europeans in this room?
Might be.
Well, the other ones can thank us for that regulation, opening up the iOS ecosystem to third-party app stores. You know, we're not seeing a lot of stuff happening right now, but that regulation is going to make sure that we're expecting a lot of new attack vectors on iOS in the future. And finally, and this is another worrisome one, just like 20 years ago, when stuff started in the fraud era, there are malicious desktop malware starting to do fraud on web banks, and then they leverage that to move off into other spaces. We are seeing some of this stuff happening as well. Apparently, some APT-like organizations are starting to leverage this as well. We're calling it LightSpy 2, and I must credit this where credit's due. The initial LightSpy research was not done by Fabric, but by other companies, and they had attributed it to APT41. Now, we can't verify that. The one thing we can verify is that the group behind these attacks are definitely better funded and better structured because of the stuff that they're creating. LightSpy 2 will be deployed as a fake Telegram app. Again, will do as advertised on the tin, but it has the ability to load modules. And one of the modules will actually mimic WeChat. Now, WeChat, probably not a lot of you use it. Maybe one or two of you might. It is the Chinese everything app. It's your dating app, it's your banking app, and it's your Uber and many more things all at once. The thing it's able to do is by mimicking that app, that module will be able to download all of your payment data directly off of the WeChat backend. Now, why would they do this? They are building these profiles probably on people. That's what we think. And another capability that it has is to open up the microphone and listen in on conversations. Now, anyone of you have seen one of my favorite movies, The Dark Knight Rises? Yeah? Yeah. Was it amazing? I thought so. Christopher Nolan. And at this one given moment, his researcher, Fox, he leverages all the mobile phones in Gotham to form one big surveillance system. Now, this is what they kind of seem to do with this functionality. We don't exactly know how they deploy this. You can't find samples of this in the App Store. But let's just say that it would be super easy to deploy by, for example, DNS poisoning, right? And who is good at DNS poisoning? Those might be, let's say, organizations that have full control of all the firewalls in a given country, for example, right? So that's what we're talking about right here. We are following this space. This is the first one we ever saw, and this is a big canary as well.
Talking about canaries, Jort. After hearing all this, you might think, why is this relevant? So mobile malware is a trend that everybody should follow. We are here to say that that trend and that threat is here to stay. The threat is not going away. It's going to be more impactful, and it will definitely also impact you and me and you.
True. Because if all of that, what we just told you, it sounds eerily familiar to you, might be true. Like I said, none of this is really new in a sense, because all of this has happened on the web channels as well. They were, entrepreneurial criminals, largely Russian-speaking, who were actually creating those malwares and doing fraud with it as a first attempt to steal money off of Western banks. But that, of course, branched out very rapidly. The first one we saw was in APT territory, right? But the second one, we all know this one, was exactly the same infrastructures, the same criminal groups, and the same malwares that were being leveraged for ransomware. The first one was CryptoLocker. And that branched out further and further and further. NotPetya was a sabotage tool being used in geopolitical context. And further on, industrial espionage and industrial sabotage, I should say, Industroyer, those things are all branching out of the same innovations, starting all the way in the back with good old banking fraud. And this is what happened just a few years ago. We've been tracking this, right? For a few years now. And it's just a small branch out, but now we're seeing these APTs. And this is where we are. So we don't know where this is going to go. We're not saying this is going to be a tsunami of misery, but we should all take notice. And the fraud people are some of the first to see it.
So there are probably some fraud experts in the room. Saw some wobbly hands, but so if I would ask you or any other global team in the world of fraud experts, what keeps you awake at night? You will probably answer, especially are you based in the EU, is that impersonation and romance scams are keeping you up at night. These are the scams where you need contextual data, and they are really hard to detect only on transactional data. I've been in the EFG event this week on Tuesday, and there you see that the top, they asked the group the same question. It was also impersonation fraud, but very specifically more in the EU than in America. So, talking about the EU, thanks, you need to, yeah.
Yeah, I got you.
These are European classifications, so be really clear about that. And when we are talking about romance scams, we also included pig butchering. So that's then you know why the number is 26. So we also noticed that impersonation bank and bank fraud scams, there are one out of 5. And the commonality between both of them, like you all know, is really putting pressure, emotional pressure on the victim.
Yeah. Now, I know, Jacqueline, that the good people at RSA have asked us to give us their slides a few months ago already. So yes. We do have an update of last week. And what we do see is that investment scams are kind of growing and taking over. So we don't know if that's a temporary, so that kind of taken over as the #1 threat worldwide. But for whatever it is, they are scams in essence, social engineering. So this is what the fraud people are also busy with. Even though they are seeing those innovations, they are seeing the mobile malwares as a niche new problem that they have. They're all busy fighting this, aren't we?
And investment scams are even higher in the US than in Europe.
Exactly, yeah. Listen. Don't trust a guy with a banana. Right? One of the best red teamers I ever met told me, listen, you don't go through a security gate with a mug or don't be so mundane. What you want to do is hold a banana because everyone trusts a guy with a banana. If you're mellow enough to eat a banana, you probably have no ill intent. So that was a big learning for me. And that's the problem with scams exactly. Right? We're trying to detect bananas in our fraud chains. Pressure, manipulation, cheating, charming. How do we do that? How we define that in IOCs and TTPs? This is a big problem.
Yeah, what you see for a long period is that creating less friction for the customer is really important in the customer banking journey. But independent research showed that customers currently prioritize safety above convenience. And if that is necessary, create friction because it's still prioritized and it's independent research, so not any bank. So that's really important to notice. And from my background as global head of fraud prevention and detection in a big bank in Europe, I can tell that if you detect fraud, your net promoter score goes up of 40%.
40%?
40%. And I heard from one of the panelists on Tuesday that if you communicate about awareness on fraud, your net promoter score goes up with 20%. So I think we can use and leverage on it to really get and remain the trust of our customers in the banking industry.
So what you're saying, Jacqueline, is that doing fraud in the right way has a measurable impact on your brand and reputation.
Definitely.
Right. Well, that's a good takeaway. Well, for us as anti-fraud practitioners, we're being confronted with the reality that we need to be DJs. Fraud people need to be DJs. Whether the attacks hype is very much high-tech, like with the mobile malware, or whether it's super low-tech, like with social engineering and scams, investment fraud, romance fraud, and what have you. They require vastly different methods to do detection. And again, with scams, you're trying to detect bananas. A banana is low tech, and the more low tech an attack is, the more high tech your detection approach is going to need to be. That's the sad reality of it. But now that scams have become such a global problem, everyone knows the numbers, won't bore you with the tens of millions and the rising FBI numbers, probably all true. Whatever it is, they put us in a place where we're starting to take notice and need to do something. But here's the other thing. As a good DJ knows, no scam is 100% social engineering or 100% high tech. There's always a little bit of a shade of gray, like in that wonderful book, or maybe not so wonderful, but that's what it is. You need to combine those things. You kind of need your slider to be able to drag from left to right in order to operate in your detection chain.
So we have spoken about the problem, the issue, but unfortunately there are also a couple of complications here. First of all, new regulations causing a shift towards the reimbursement and liability shift towards banks. So that's the first thing. Even if the victim authorized the payment, so that's quite interesting what's happening over there. What we also need to consider if faster payments is either a curse or a blessing. And lastly, and not important, a lot of us have been born in a mobile world. Especially the generation who's coming after us, they are born in a mobile world. And what we see currently is that we need visibility and data to detect what's happening malicious on the mobile. And that's really, really key trend and a complication because we are lacking visibility sometimes.
Yeah. And you're making another very good point, I think, Jacqueline, is that the other day there was a piece of research, I believe it was, I am now plugging Deloitte, but it was a Deloitte piece of research that said that Gen Z was actually 3 times more likely to fall victim to scams than the generation of the baby boomers. Did you know that? Did you expect that? Maybe you read the research. Right, on the other hand, right, Gen Z doesn't have as much cash on their savings account, right? So it kind of balances out. But if we're talking about actual successful attempts, that's what we're talking about here.
Kill chain.
Well, this places us in the next important discussion, right? When we're talking about low tech and high tech, and if we're talking about being proactive in this approach, with the high-tech attacks, we need threat intelligence to be part of our detection chain. So that makes sense. Now, high-tech attacks and the integration of threat intelligence in anti-fraud is already a process in itself. But then we're already seeing in our timelines that some of these problems are starting to spawn off APT-like risks and other worries. And these need to be communicated back to the other side of the house as well. So how do we coordinate this? Now, cyber fraud fusion is by no means something I invented. As a matter of fact, I see a gentleman sitting there. Hello, Senan. You are actually one of the founding fathers of developing and implementing this in a large organization, right? So you have more experience in this than I have. But the important thing is that we cannot look at these processes anymore in isolation. And the second thing is, like with threat intelligence, the strength is often in sharing, and we're not sharing enough if it comes to anti-fraud. What do we need in order to share? A common vocabulary, and we're lacking that. We don't have that, right? Just as MITRE ATT&CK is there, MITRE ATT&CK is amazing, like for technical attacks, for hacking, malware. But we don't have a similar taxonomy for anti-fraud. So that's what we need to have. We need a kill chain, a fraud kill chain. And there's actually many people, practitioners, who have developed one. And that is awesome. But we still haven't aligned on this. And I'm actually happy to say that here at RSA 2024, the first steps are being taken to align this stuff going forward, because it is necessary. For the one, a scam might be fully the victim's own fault. For the other one, a scam might be eligible for reimbursable incident.
And Ewart, this goes beyond the internal of the fraud kill chain, because like a couple of you who have attended the Birds of a Feather last Monday, there was also a need to cooperate across different organizations, governmental, the legal departments, the public departments, telcos, and the banks. So I think we should extend it beyond the internal fraud kill chain.
I think that is a fantastic point. So let's dive into the nitty-gritty real fast before we allow you to go to the wonderful final act, Alicia Keys. Yeah. And if you guys want us to hurry up, just say so, okay? I don't know how far of a walk it is, but let's dive in a little bit. What we did is we mapped out for the most prevalent attacks, some of the TTPs that are in there in our fraud kill chain. And what we're seeing right here, what I boxed in yellow, these are the areas that are most detectable in an anti-fraud chain, okay? And what we're seeing with the technological attacks, the mobile malware attacks, you have ample opportunity. They are not only measurable, they are observable, so they can be translated into a detection chain. And that is key. But if we're talking about scams, like a romance scam, you will see, for example, in the account access stage, there is virtually no opportunity to see what's going on there. So that limits the detection capability. And that's why, as I said, low-tech attack types require high-tech to mitigate.
Yeah, 3 dead canaries, not only one. You saw one on the way here. It was really, really awful. A real one dropped dead on the street while Ewart was walking towards this presentation. You can't believe it. And then your presentation is about canaries. But now we're talking about even 3 dead canaries and 1 sick one. And what are the key takeaways of this presentation? What should it be? First of all, mobile banking means mobile threats and attacks. Second of all, biometrics and endpoint security are circumvented. Third of all, the fraud problem is really extending the cyber and really is getting into a global problem if it's not already there. And fourth, I think it is really, really important and not underestimate that scams are moving from online to mobile.
Yeah. And when I have my monthly discussions with Gartner, this is what they say to me. And this is not bashing them, this is just the reality of what they report. They say the market for mobile security is a few hundred million big. That's crazy in my mind, right? As in comparison to all the other stuff that we're doing, which is tens of billions, is that market so small? Does the industry deem mobile security good enough? I can't believe that. I can't believe that. Because, you know, in a few years, already our kids are only on their mobile. And your mobile phone is not just a window on the internet like your browser was 20 years ago. It is your identity. It is your finance. It is your family life. It is your personal identifiable information. It is your everything. And we're deeming mobile security good enough? I cannot believe that. I don't want to believe that. So, there's the call to action, right? And I numbered them for you, because what can we do, what can you do, what advice would I give you? Let's look at these things. The last time we saw these kinds of criminal disruptions in the ecosystem, it led to things like global ransomware, pandemics, and tools being used in geopolitical conflict. You know, the consequences of which we will be dealing with for years and years to come. So, right, if you have mobile channels, adopt at least some kind of visibility, strategic or tactical or both, on what's going to happen with mobile threats. If you have many consumers on mobile, please adopt visibility. Right? Visibility is key towards every good detection system. And if you don't have all this, follow the news or check out our talks every now and then. We'll update you for free.
Or blogs.
The second one. By all means, rules and regulation, we've only touched base on this very, very shortly because it allows, doesn't it, Mr. Pella right here in the front knows this better than anyone, it allows for a complete week of discussions, right? But this is an important space to look at, right? And why don't you already think about what would happen if there would be a reimbursement, a law on scams? Because this is happening in other parts of the world as we speak. The EU is trying to drag in telcos, and you might think, shouldn't they drag in big tech as well? Let's see how they fare, right? But this is what's happening in other parts of the world. So perform that risk assessment. What would happen and what would that mean for our business and our operation? And finally, if you do run an anti-fraud system, if you do leverage TI, know that these things should either be very closely aligned, because that will help you tremendously, and analyze the benefits of adopting a fusion strategy. Finally, I truly, truly believe, and I'm passionate about making this a point for myself and for our company going forward, that we need a common vocabulary on dealing with fraud in order to share, because this is a global problem.
Yes. So in summary, it not only requires a network to beat a network, but also you definitely need to have the right data in place. That requires visibility and on mobile threats and fraud indicators. So yeah, Ewart and myself would really like to thank you for joining us, and there's an open floor for Q&A because now the presentation is a wrap. And hopefully we stay a bit before joining Alicia Keys. And if there are any questions, please use the mic.
So, Ewart, a question for you. What correlation are you seeing between the people who are creating mobile malware and these large organizations that are aggressively doing the scam to consumers? Are you seeing any confluence there between the same people? And I understand that the mobile malware is more of a technical thing and the scam is more of a social engineering thing. But in your research, are you seeing any linkage between those two at this point?
I think that is a fantastic point, because we did see that 20 years ago, right? They started out fully automated, the attacks, and later on went on to become way more manual and way more targeted and focused, right? We don't have a lot of evidence that these social engineering groups are usually from different continents than where let's say, the mobile malware people are from, and we don't have a lot of evidence of play between them. However, like has happened in the past, I do believe it is very logical there is some collaboration going on. I just don't have a lot of evidence, and I will believe is likely it's going to happen. Just don't know when.
Yes.
Every field does it. You start with websites, they move to apps.
Yeah.
So question about device posture. And I am a cybersecurity manager for a credit union of about 14 million members. And account takeover is a very big part of what I try to prevent. Are there tools like available, like mobile app libraries that our kind of digital engineering team could include in the app to sort of detect malware, or is that something that you guys have thought about or included?
Yeah.
Because if you've got the device, if you've got full control over the device, like even FIDO2 MFA, you own the device, so you can get that.
Yeah, I think that is a very fair point, and like I said, the market for mobile device security has actually slowed down over the last years, which is, in my mind, like I said, is kind of incredible, but I don't build the markets, right? What I do know, there's a lot of appetite from our customers that we see. We say, hey, listen, with that product of yours, our customers seem better protected than we are, right? So can't we have that? So we see that as a sign that the market might be veering up again, and indeed standalone products like mobile EDRs are indeed, they are in our portfolio, as well as they are, I hope, becoming more popular again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And if that was all, I wish you a fantastic afternoon with Alicia Keys.
Yes.